Welcome
to Even Odds. I'm Carly.
I'm Matt.
And this is Warhammer Wednesdays.
Today, we are talking about, if you couldn't have guessed from the title, the advanced rules. So, the advanced rules basically they're not required.
No.
But
and you've watched a few of our battle reports now.
Yeah, we've already been using them.
Seen a couple here and there, but now we're going to just kind of backtrack and explain it a little bit.
Yeah, so, probably a good portion of you guys already use these, already know them. But for those of you guys who are still learning Kill Team, we just thought it'd be good to get this out there so that you guys have something, easy to reference or whatever. So the advanced rules are kind of split up into two
two categories.
Categories, that's the word. The first being rules for terrain, and then the second being extra rules for movement
how
over
you guys operate
said
with
terrain.
In terrain.
Yeah.
On an advanced level.
So, the rules for the different types of terrain, there's 4 of them. There is open ground, difficult terrain, dangerous terrain, and impassable terrain. Impassable. So, open ground is the easiest. It's just...
It's kind of a non-advanced rule.
Yeah, it's
because it's open ground.
Right. The next one is difficult terrain. So, difficult terrain... these are things that when you're setting up your kill team board, you can declare something as difficult terrain. You want to talk with your opponent and say what's difficult terrain or not. We like to have our craters be difficult terrain because
you found these just somewhere online.
Yeah, I got these particular ones off Amazon.
Okay. They're cool. I think they look really cool too.
So if everywhere on the board you can move about freely, there's no real choice. But if perhaps behind a fortified position there is some difficult terrain that makes it hard to move around, so you can get the cover but you have to deal with difficult terrain, that sort of thing, gives some choice there. Here's some open ground that has nothing, it provides no cover, but it's also easy to walk through. That might inform your decision. So difficult terrain, basically, it amounts to that every inch of movement that it takes to go through the difficult terrain costs double.
So you cut your movement in half if you're going over difficult terrain. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, very straightforward, in fact. But it does, so let's say he's not right at the edge. Just remember each inch is technically 2. So if he's not at the edge and he's, let's say, an inch away and he wants to cross, he'll take an inch to get up to it, 2 inches to get through it, and then so he's only moved 2 inches on the table, but he's really moved 3.
Okay, so his movement is 6 inches,
right,
or whatever. So what if he's like 3 inches, or what if he's 2 inches away? Can he land on difficult terrain?
Absolutely, you can. Yeah, you can end your move in or on difficult terrain. There's no problem with that. It's just it just signifies how far you can get through it. Yeah, when you have to stop.
And it doesn't affect your shooting or anything.
No, it doesn't affect anything like that.
All right.
So then, moving on from difficult terrain, you have dangerous terrain.
Ooh.
Now, dangerous terrain, it works just like difficult terrain, where every inch that you move through it costs double. So an inch is 2 inches, half an inch is an inch, etc. But also, if you move into, out of, or through dangerous terrain, you have to take a dangerous terrain test, which is essentially roll a die, a d6, and on a 1, you take a mortal wound. So you only have a 1 in 6 chance of...
So if it's dangerous, it has both the difficult terrain parameters as well as if you move through it,
into it or
out of it.
Then you take a dangerous terrain test.
Dangerous terrain test.
And so keep in mind, if you take a mortal wound from your dangerous terrain test, that might
just
cause an injury roll, and then
cause an injury roll.
Right, and then you might get taken out of action. So that's the subsequent sort of interesting factor about dangerous terrain, is that you might for example, you might have an objective that has dangerous terrain all around it. So both teams need to get to the objective, but it's dangerous to do so. So that's how it can kind of add to your game and make things more interesting. The last terrain rule, like open ground, is extremely easy. It's called impassable terrain.
Yeah.
And
so technically there's kind of only 2 of the 4 that are super interactive at all.
Right.
But impassable still is, in the sense of that it's really going to massively slow you down and potentially impact where you're going to move across the board based on what you know is coming up.
Right. And impassable terrain is really simple. It is a piece of terrain or an area or what have you that you cannot move in it, out of it, whatever. You can't. Well, you can't move out of it because you can never get in it.
Well, you can only go around it, right?
And you cannot move over it. For those things that maybe have fly or something, you can't.
Oh, you can't even go over it.
You
with
can't
fly?
go over it.
Because the other things are like you can't, like you don't have to worry about it with fly. Right. So for dangerous and difficult terrain, if you have a fly model,
you can just fly over it.
You just go over it and it doesn't happen. But for impassable, it includes,
you can't even go. It's
so
impassable.
it's like in the air.
Yes. Imagine it if we said that this was impassable terrain. This entire section, you can't move in it or out of it, and it just extends infinitely upwards.
So even a fly character.
Yeah, a fly character could not fly over it. Yep.
All right. And so again, this is all just stuff that you predetermine.
Yes.
Like that you just agree upon with your opponent.
When you're setting up your board. Right. So when you're setting up your board, you might want to include craters. And when you put the crater on the board, you talk with your opponent and you say, hey, let's make the craters difficult terrain. Or, you might have a river. And you might say, hey, the river is dangerous terrain because you might get swept away or something like that.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like it's a way of upping the ante with your board.
Right. And you can use those things. Yeah. You can use those things both to make the actual game more interesting and also to make the narrative more interesting.
Exactly,
you know, and you could even, you don't need to have something that is super, distinct, like a crater for difficult terrain. You could say like, hey, this building,
agree upon something.
Right. You could say, hey, this building is irradiated, so it's the entire building is dangerous terrain. Just to have, and you can use those to create, like I said, create a narrative.
Yeah, something that's more interesting.
Right.
Narrative.
Right.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. Okay.
So the second portion of the advanced rules are your sort of advanced rules for movement.
And most of it has to do with how then the models move according to like terrain.
Right.
Well, let's see. So that's the first one is climbing.
The first one is climbing, and basically we'll just get that off. Basically, everybody sort of does this already intuitively, and it's kind of covered in the basic rules. They just don't call it climbing. But basically, here's Dorox. He wants to climb up to have a fight with the Gene Stealer cults. He can climb this. He's got that power sword. He's got to get up there. He can climb this wall and go up it and end his move up here.
And you just count the inches that way as movement.
Yep. Again, it's one of those things that it's sort of it's intuitive in the fact that you're already doing it, but it does technically need to be stated for other things, because also, here's a much smaller wall. You can also climb up and over this wall. So there you go.
Okay, so when you're doing this, you count from the front of your base, and then it has to still be to the front of your base here, so you have to include the extra inch up here. Okay.
Yeah, and so,
So
if
it's
you
not
can't,
just a direct, like, taking a measuring tape here and going, okay, well, this is 6 inches or 5 inches. You need that extra
inch, which
to
this
actually
is
get up on.
yeah, this is the official Kill Team terrain, and I actually do think it's interesting because they made it 5 inches tall, and I do think that's exactly why,
that
so that it's
reason,
exactly if you are at the base,
right. And you do,
and
so
you
you
climb,
have to basically be all the way there,
right,
and then only get
Right.
to the edge.
Right.
Which actually is interesting because that brings us into the next one, which is falling.
Yeah. So
it's
falling,
actually a really good segue right into the next thing.
So falling, if you have a model, if Dorox here is within an inch of the edge,
meaning like this within an inch, though, right? Like where there is still a space of an inch there. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
So if even there.
Right. So if he's within an inch of an edge of an elevated position like this, and he gets hit by an attack, then he needs to, or it clarifies anything that is not. If something other than an attack causes them to lose a wound, so that would be like something like a psychic power. A psychic power is not technically an attack, but okay. So if they're hit with something that would cause them to lose a wound, they have to take a falling test. And again, just like the dangerous terrain test is you roll a 1, or if you roll a 1 on your d6, you take the wound. Here, same thing, you roll a d6, and if you roll a 1, you fail the falling test.
And it means you fall down.
You fall down. So you would take your model and move them the closest route to the edge, off, and then straight down. So they fall down. Then, if they fall, you take falling damage. So for every 3 inches that you fall, you'll roll a d6, and on a 5+, they'll take a mortal wound.
So in this case, falling down 6 inches.
Well, this would be a 5-inch fall.
Well, not if he's an inch here, or.
But he's not falling. He's not falling this inch. He gets here, then he goes straight down. That's what he's falling.
Oh, it's just the amount you're falling.
Yes.
And so then you round down or round up?
You round down. It's so for every full 3 inches.
So if you're falling 5 inches, you roll
would
1. Then,
But if you were falling, let's say,
Yeah, but you wouldn't even be able to get up there because you only have a 6-inch move. So it wouldn't count this extra inch that you're falling?
No, but the thing is, so you might have a board that now this doesn't actually fit here, but it does on the other side. So actually, let's rotate.
Where it would have extra levels.
Yeah. So, but if your board if you have something like this, and you're up here, and you've gotten up there, either you were there from deployment or you've moved up there over the course of the game, and then you fall. Now that's 10 inches. So that's 3, 6, 9. You'd roll 3 die, and for every 5 up, you would roll a.
But you're sure it doesn't count the amount of extra space you're
positive.
Falling?
It's for roll a d6 for every full 3-inch the model has fallen. Okay? So and if we go to falling tests, on a 1 the test is failed and the model is knocked off the edge. Move the model over the edge by the shortest route possible, then straight down till they hit a lower level. So you fall when you go down.
Okay.
Right? So falling damage.
So again, that's a way you could make the game more dynamic with your terrain, is by creating multi-levels.
And, multiple levels.
Interacting then with like teasing your opponent by being up really high.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. You might be up really high, and so you could fall, but you might also be obscured. So you're saying, sure, you could knock me off, but you're. I'm obscured, so relative safety, right? Then, and also the foible to falling is, of course, jumping down. You can elect to jump down instead of falling down.
Well, that's the last of it, right? That's the last of the advanced rules is jumping down, right?
Well, we skipped a piece, but we'll come back.
Oh,
we'll
right.
Come back around.
Okay, right. Yeah. Okay, so almost.
Yeah, so jumping down, instead of it's the same as falling, where you'll take a falling test for every 3 inches that you fall down, except that because you're jumping, because it's voluntary.
Because you're just deciding to do it.
Right. Yeah. You use the normal falling rules, but roll 1 fewer dice than you normally would. So if you're jumping down 6 inches from here or whatever, instead of rolling 2 dice, you'd roll 1 instead.
Wait, so if you're jumping down from 5 inches, you
would roll 1 fewer dice than you normally would, so you'd roll 0 dice.
So you can jump down with impunity under 6 inches.
And
all right, and then finally,
you have barriers
and gaps.
And basically, barriers and gaps work like this. For barriers, if they are less than 1.5 inches high and 1.5 inches deep or width or whatever, then you can, as part of your movement, leap over them with no additional penalty to your movement. So, for example, this piece is more than 1.5 inches high, so you would need to climb up and over it, spending movement to go up, across, and down. But this barrier is less than 1.5 inches high or deep, and you can move across it with no penalty. Gaps and leaping.
So is the point of having barriers like that just to create obstruction and to make your board more dynamic? But mostly to create obstruction, right?
So, yeah, it's there so that you can gain obscurement. But not to be there to punish you from moving across it. Okay. Because something like this piece, you absolutely get obscurement from it, but you have to spend your movement up and over to climb it. Whereas here, with this, you get obscurement and no penalty for moving over. Okay? So gaps work just the same in terms of the no penalty to move. So here's a gap that is more than 2 inches. So for Dorox to get across, he would have to spend his movement climbing down, moving over, climbing back up. But if the gap is 2 inches or less, then Dorox can hop across with no penalty. Now, of course, he still spends the movement to go across the gap, but he doesn't have to go down and back up. He can just leap across.
Okay.
And
cool.
That's basically it for the advanced rules. And you can use these advanced rules to create more dynamic games, create more dynamic narratives within your game, and create interesting choices for you and your opponent in the deployment phase and the movement phase.
Yeah.
All right?
Cool.
There you go. There you have it. So thank you so much for watching, guys. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have some thoughts on the advanced rules, or if we didn't mention something, say so in the comments below. We'll have a discussion about it. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. We'll be back every week on Warhammer Wednesdays and Tabletop Gameplay Fridays. We'll see you on the next one.
Yeah,
bye.
Yeah, we're squeaking. But anyway, yeah.
Okay.
All right.